Hiya! Welcome to Sniper's Rest. Sniper's Rest is the last best rest stop in the here and there, the place between where you're coming from and where you're going. I am Sniper Shadow, and I reside here in Sniper's Rest as a guide and custodian to those who pass through the here and there. I visit the worlds within the multiverse often, but I'm always here to guide and care for travelers such as yourself that pass through the here and there. Welcome, my friend! It's good to see you. I hope you have been well these last few weeks. We have been catching up on chores around here, and there is only so many hours in the day, isn't there? Nevertheless, we're here once again, so have a seat, and please take a rest here before continuing your journey. Today we continue reading the series of short stories by H.P. Lovecraft. Today's story is called He. It was written in 1925 and first published in the September 1926 issue of Weird Tales. Let's see what today brings. I saw him on a sleepless night when I was taking a walk desperately to save my soul and my vision. My coming to New York had been a mistake, for whereas I had looked for a poignant wonder and inspiration in the teeming labyrinths of ancient streets that twist endlessly from forgotten courts and squares and waterfronts to courts and squares and waterfronts equally forgotten, and in the cyclopean modern towers and pinnacles that rise blackly Babylonian under waning moons, I had found instead only a sense of horror and depression which threatened to master, paralyze, and annihilate me. The disillusion had been gradual, coming for the first time upon the town. I had seen it in the sunset from a bridge, majestic above its waters. Its incredible peaks and pyramids rise flower-like and delicate from pools of violet mist to play with the flaming gold clouds and the first stars of the evening. Then it had lighted up window by window above the shimmering tides where lanterns nodded and glided and deep horns bayed weird harmonies, and itself became a starry ferment of dream, redolent of fairy music, and with the marvels of Casanone and Samarkand and El Dorado and all glorious and half-fabulous cities. Shortly afterwards, I was taken through those antique ways so dear to my fancy, narrow, curving alleys and passages where rows of red Gregorian brick blinked, with small-paned dormers above pillared doorways that had long-looked gilded sedans and panelled coaches. And in the first flush of realization of these long-wished things, I thought I had indeed achieved such treasures as would make me in time a poet. But success and happiness were not to be. Garish daylight shrewd only squalor and alienage, and the noxious elephantis of climbing, spreading stone where the moon had hinted of loveliness and elder magic, and the throngs of people that seethed through the fume-like streets were squat, swarthy strangers with hardened faces and narrowed eyes, shrewd strangers, without dreams and without kinship to the scenes about them, who could never mean aught to a blue-eyed man of old folk, with a love of fair green lanes and white New England village steeples in his heart. So instead of poems I had hoped for, there came only shuddering blankness and ineffable loneliness, and I saw at last a fearful truth which no one had ever dared to breathe before, the unwhisperable secrets of secrets, the fact that this city of stone and stridor is not a sentient perpetuation of old New York as London is of old London and Paris of old Paris, but that it is, in fact, quite dead, its sprawling body imperfectly embalmed and infested with queer animate things which have nothing to do with it as it was in life. Upon making this discovery I ceased to sleep comfortably, though something of a resigned tranquillity came back as I gradually formed the habit of keeping off the streets by day and venturing abroad only at night. When the darkness calls forth what little of the past still hovers wraith-like about, and old white doorways remember the stalwart forms that once passed through them. With this mode of relief, I even wrote a few poems, but still refrained from going home to my people, lest I seem to crawl back ignobly in defeat. Then, on a sleepless night's walk, I met the man. It was in a grotesque hidden courtyard of Greenwich section, for there in my ignorance I had settled, having heard of the place as the natural home of poets and artists. The archaic lanes and houses and unexpected bits of square and court had indeed delighted me. When I found the poets and artists to be loud-voiced pretenders whose quaintness is tinsel and whose lives are a denial of all the pure beauty which is poetry and art, I stayed for the love of these venerable things. I fancied them as they were in their prime, when Greenwich was a placid village and not yet engulfed by the town, and the hours before dawn, when all the revellers had slunk away, I used to wander alone among the cryptical windings and brood upon the curious arcana which generations must have deposited there. This kept my soul alive and gave me a few of those dreams and visions for which the poet far within me cried out. The man came upon me at about 2 one cloudy August morning, as I was threading a series of detached courtyards, now accessible only through the unlighted hallways of intervening buildings, but once forming parts of a continuous network of picturesque alleys. I had heard of them by vague rumor and realized that they could not be upon any map of today, but the fact that they were forgotten only endeared them to me, so that I sought them with twice my usual eagerness. Now that I had found them, my eagerness was again redoubled, for something in their arrangement dimly hinted that they might be only a few of many, with dark, dumb counterparts wedged obscurely betwixt high blank walls and deserted rear tenements, or lurking lamplessly behind archways unbetrayed by hordes of the foreign-speaking, or guarded by fugitive and uncommunicative artists whose practices did not invite publicly or the light of day. He spoke to me without invitation, noting my mood and glances as I studied certain knockered doorways above iron-railed steps, the pallid glow of transiered transomes feebly lighting my face. His own face was in shadow, and he wore a wide-brimmed hat, which somehow blended perfectly with the out-of-date cloak he affected. But I was subtly disquieted even before he addressed me. His form was very slight, thin, almost to cadaverousness, and his voice proved phenomenally soft and hollow, though not particularly deep. He had, he said, noticed me several times at my wanderings, and had inferred that I resembled him in loving vestiges of former years. Would I like the guidance of one long practice in these explorations, and possess local information profoundly deeper than any which an obvious newcomer could possibly have gained? As he spoke, I caught a glimpse of his face in the yellow beam from a solitary attic window. It was a noble, even a handsome, elderly countenance that bore marks of lineage and refinement, unusual for the age and place. Yet some quality about it disturbed me almost as much as its features pleased me. Perhaps it was too white, or too expressionless, or too much out of keeping with the locality to make me feel easy or comfortable. Nevertheless, I followed him, for in those dreary days my quest for antique beauty and mystery was all that I had to keep my soul alive, and I reckoned it a rare favour of fate to fall in with one of these kindred seeking seemed to have penetrated so much farther than mine. Something in the night constrained the cloaked man to silence, and for a long hour he led me forward without needless words, making only the briefest of comments concerning ancient names and dates and changes, and directing my progress very largely by gestures, as we squeezed through interstices, tiptoed through corridors, clambered over brick walls, and once crawled on hands and knees through a low-arched passage of stone, whose immense length and tortuous twistings effaced at every hint of geographical location I had managed to preserve. The things we saw were very old and marvelous, or at least they seemed so in the few straggling rays of light which I viewed them. and I shall never forget the tottering laconic columns and fluted plastiers and unearred heads, iron fence posts and flaring linteled windows and decorative fanlights that appeared to grow quainter and stranger the deeper we advanced into this inexhaustible maze of unknown antiquity. We met no person, and as time passed, the lighted windows became fewer and fewer. The streetlights we first encountered had been of oil and of the ancient lozenge pattern. Later I noticed some with candles, and at last, after traversing a horrible unlighted court where my guide had led with his gloved hand through total blackness to a narrow wooden gate in a high wall, we came upon a fragment of alley lit only by lanterns in front of every seventh house, unbelievingly colonial tin lanterns with conical tops and holes punched in the sides. This alley led steeply uphill, more steeply than I thought possible in this part of New York, and the upper end was blocked squarely by the ivy-clad wall of a private estate, beyond which I could see a pale cupola and the tops of trees waving against a vague lightness in the sky. In this wall was a small, low-arched gate of nail-studded black oak, which the man proceeded to unlock with a ponderous key. Leading me within, he steered a course in utter blackness over what seemed to be a gravel path, and finally up a flight of stone steps to the door of the house, which he unlocked and then opened for me. We entered, and as we did so I grew faint from a reek of infinite mustiness which welled out to meet us, and which must have been the fruit of unwholesome centuries of decay. My host appeared not to notice this, and in courtesy I kept silent, as he piloted me up a curving stairway, across a hall, and into a room whose door I heard him lock behind us. Then I saw him pull the curtains of 3 small-paned windows that barely shrewd themselves against the lightened sky, after which he crossed to the mantel, struck a flint and steel, lighted 2 candles of a candelabrum of 12 sconces, and made a gesture enjoining soft-toned speech. In this feeble radiance I saw that we were in a spacious, well-furnished and panelled library dating from the first quarter of the 18th century, with splendid doorway pediments, a delightful Doric cornice, and magnificently carved overmantel with scroll and urn top. Above the crowded bookshelf, at intervals, along the walls, were well-wrought family portraits, all tarnished to an enigmatical dimness, and bearing an unmistakable likeness to the man who now motioned me to a chair beside the great Chippendale table. Before seating himself across the table from me, my host paused for a moment as if in embarrassment, then, tardily removing his gloved, wide-brimmed hat and cloak, stood theatrically, revealed in full mid-Gregorian costume, from his queued hair to his neck ruffles to his knee breeches, silk hose and buckled shoes I had not previously noticed. Now, slowly sinking into the lyre-back chair, he commenced to eye me intently. Without his hat, he took on an aspect of extreme age, which was scarcely visible before, and I wondered if this unperceived mark of singular longevity were not one of the sources of my original disquiet. But then he spoke at length, his voice soft and hollow and carefully muffled, not infrequently quavered, and now and then I had great difficulty in following him, as I listened with a thrill of amazement and half-disavowed alarm which grew each instant. "You behold, sir," my host began, "a man of very eccentrical habits, for whose costume no apology need be offered to one with your wit and inclinations. Reflecting upon better times, I have not scrupled to ascertain their ways or adopt their dress and manners, and indulge which offends none if practised without ostentation. It hath been my good fortune to retain the rural seat of my ancestors, swallowed though it was by 2 towns, first Greenwich, which built up hither after 1800, then New York, which joined on near 1830. There were many reasons for the close keeping of this place in my family, and I have not been remiss in discharging such obligations. The squire who succeeded to it in 1768 studied Taton arts and made Taton discoveries, all connected with influence residing in this particular plot of ground, and enmity deserving of the strongest guarding. Some curious effects of these arts and discoveries I now propose to show you, under the strictest secrecy, and I believe I may rely on my judgment of men enough to have no distrust of either your interest or your fidelity. He paused, but I could only nod my head. I have said that I was alarmed, yet to my soul nothing was more deadly than the material daylight world of New York. And whether this man were a harmless eccentric or a wielder of dangerous arts, I had no choice save to follow him and slake my sense of wonder on whatever he might have to offer. So I listened. To my ancestor, he continued, there appeared to reside some very remarkable qualities in the will of mankind, qualities having a little suspected dominance not only over the acts of oneself or self of others, but over every variety of force and substance in nature, and over many elements and dimensions deemed more universal than nature herself. May I say that he flouted the sanctity of things as great as space and time, and that he put strange uses to the rites of certain American Indians once encamped upon this hill. These American Indians shrewd cola when the place was built, and were plaguy pestilent in asking to visit the grounds at full moon. For years they stole over the wall each month when they could, and by stealth performed Satan acts. Then, in 68, the new squire catched them in their doings, and stood still at what he saw. Thereafter he bargained with them and exchanged the free access of his grounds for the exact inwardness of what they did, learning that their grandfathers got part of their custom from other ancestors, and part from an old Dutchman in the time of the States General. And pox on him, I have feared the squire must have saved them monstrous bad run, whether or not by intent, for a week after he learnt the secret, he was the only man living that knew it. You, sir, are the first outsider to be told there is a secret, and split me if I'd have risked tampering that much with the powers, had ye not been so hot after bygone things. I shuddered as the man grew colloquial and familiar with speech of another day. He went on, but you must know, sir, that what the squire got from those was but a small part of the langering he came to have. He had not been at Oxford for nothing, nor talked to no account with an ancient chemist and astrologer in Paris. He was, in fine, made sensible that all the world is but the smoke of our intellects, past the bidding of the vulgar, by and by the wise, to be puffed out and drawn like any cloud of prime Virginia tobacco. What we want, what we may make about us, and what we don't want, we may sweep away. I won't say that all is wholly true in body, but 'tis sufficient true to furnish a very pretty spectacle now and then. You, I conceive, would be tickled by a better sight of Satan than your fancy affords you, so be pleased to hold back any fright at what a design to shew. Come to the window, and be quiet. My host now took my hand to draw me to one of the two windows on the long side of the malodorous room, and at first touch of his ungloved fingers I turned cold. His flesh, though dry and firm, was of quality of ice, and I almost shrank away from his pulling. But again I thought of the emptiness and horror of reality, and boldly prepared to follow whither whatsoever I might be led. Once at the window, the man drew apart the yellow silk curtains and directed my stare into the blackness outside. For a moment I saw nothing save a myriad of tiny dancing lights far, far before me, Then, as if responding to an insidious motion of my host's hands, the flash of heat lightning played over the scene, and I looked out upon a sea of luxuriant foliage, foliage unpolluted, and not the sea of roofs to be expecting by any normal mind. On my right, the Hudson glittered wickedly, and in the distance ahead I saw an unhealthy shimmer of vast salt marsh constellated with the nervous fireflies. The flash died, and the evil smile illuminated the waxy face of the aged necromancer. That was before my time, before the squire's time. Pray, let us try again. I was faint, even fainter than the hateful modernity that accursed the city had made me. Good God, I whispered, how can you do that for any time? And as he nodded and bared the black stumps of what had been once yellow fangs, I clutched the curtains to prevent myself from falling, but he steadied me with that terrible ice-cold claw and once more made his insidious gesture. Again the lightning flashed, but this time upon the scene. Not wholly strange. It was Greenwich, the Greenwich that used to be, with the here and there roof of rows of houses as we see it now, yet with lovely green lanes and fields and bits of grassy common. The marsh still glittered beyond, but in the farther distance I saw the steeples of what was then New York, Trinity and St. Paul's, and the brick church dominating their sisters, and a faint haze of wood smoke hovering over the whole. I breathed hard, but not so much from the sight itself as from the possibilities my imagination terrifiedly conjured up. How dare you go far? I spoke with awe, and I think he shared it for a second, but the evil grin returned. Far? What I have seen would blast ye into a mad statue of stone. Back, back, forward, forward. Look ye pulling, Lackwit. And as he snarled the phrase under his breath, he gestured anew, bringing the sky flash more blinding than either which had come before. For a full 3 seconds I could glimpse that panoramic sight, and in those seconds I saw a vista which will ever afterwards torment me in dreams. I saw heavens verminous with strange flying things, and beneath them a hellish black city of giant stone terraces with hideous pyramids flung savagely to the moon, and devil lights burning from unnumbered windows, and swarming loathsomely on aerial galleries. I saw the yellow, squint-eyed people of that city, robed horribly in orange and red, dancing insanely to the pounding, fevered kettle drums, the clatter of obscene crollata, and the maniacal moaning of muted horns, whose ceaseless daggers rose and fell undulantly like the waves of a hollow-oceaned bitumen. I saw this vista, I say, and I heard with the mind's ear the blasphemous domidel of cacophony which had accompanied it. It was a shrieking fulfillment of all the horror which that corpse city had even stirred in my soul. And forgetting every injunction to silence, I screamed and screamed and screamed as my nerves gave way and the halls and walls quivered about me. Then, as the flash subsided, I saw my host was trembling too. A look of shocking fear half blotted from his face the serpent of distortion of rage which my scream had excited. He tottered, clutched at the curtains as he had done before, wriggled his head wildly like a hunted animal. God knows he had cause, for as the echoes of my screaming died away, there came another sound so hellishly suggestive that only numbed emotion kept me sane and conscious. It was the steady, stealthy creaking of the stairs beyond the locked door, as with the ascent of a bare foot or skin-shod horde, and at the last cautious, purposeful rattling of the brass latch that glowed in the feeble candlelight. The old man clawed and spat at me through the mouldy air and barked things in his throat as he swayed with the yellow curtain he clutched. The full moon. Damn ye yelping dog, ye called 'em, and they've come for me. Dead men, God sink ye. But I poisoned no rum of yours, and I hadn't kept your pox-rotting magic safe. Ye swilled yourselves sick, curse ye, and ye must needs blame the squire. Let go you, unhand that latch. I've naught for ye here. At this point, 3 slow and very deliberate raps shook the panel of the doors, and a white foam gathered at the mouth of the frantic magician. His fright turned steeply to despair, left room for resurgence of his rage against me. He staggered a step towards the table on whose edge I was steadying myself. The curtain still clutched in his right hand as his left clawed out at me, grew taut, and finally crashed down from their lofty fastenings, emitting to the room a flood of the full moon light which brightened of the sky had presaged. In those greenish beams the candles paled, and a new semblance of decay spread over the musk-reeking room with its wormy panelling, sagging floor, battered mantel, rickety furniture, and ragged draperies. It spread over the old man, too, whether from the same source or because his fear and vehemence. I saw him shrivel and blacken as he lurched near and strove to rend me with vulturine talons. Only his eyes stayed whole, and they glared with a propulsive, dilated incandescence which grew as the face around them charred and dwindled. The rapping was now repeated with greater instance, and at this time bore the hint of metal. The black thing facing me had become only a head with eyes impotently trying to wriggle across the sinking floor in my direction, and occasionally emitting feeble little spits of immortal malice. Now swift and splintering blows assailed the sickly panels as I saw the gleam of a tomahawk in its cleft-rending wood. I did not move, for I could not, but watched dazedly as the floor fell to pieces amid a colossal, shapeless influx of inksy substance starred with shining, malevolent eyes. It poured thickly like a flood of oil, bursting a rotten bulkhead, overturned a chair as it spread, and finally flowed under the table and across the room, where the blackened head with eyes still glared at me. Around that head it closed, totally swallowing it up, and in another moment it began to recede, bearing away its invisible burden without touching me, flowing again out of that black doorway and down under the unseen stairs, which creaked as before, though in reverse order. Then the floor gave way at last, and I slid gaspingly down into the nighted chamber below, choking with cobwebs and half swooning with terror. The green moon shining through the broken window shewed me the hall and door half open, and as I rose from the plaster-strewn floor and twisted myself free from the sagging ceilings, I saw sweep past it an awful torrent of blackness, with scores of baleful eyes glowing in it. It was seeking the door to the cellar, and when it found it, it vanished therein. Now I felt the floor of this lower room give as the upper chamber had done, and once a crashing above had been followed by the fall past the west window of something which must have been the cupola. Now liberated for the instant from a wreckage, I rushed through the hall to the front door, and finding myself unable to open it, seized a chair and broke a window, climbing frenziedly out upon the unkempt lawn where the moonlight danced over the yard, high grass and weeds. The wall was high, and all the gates were locked, but moving a pile of boxes in a corner, I managed to gain the top and cling to the great stone urn set there. About me in my exhaustion, I could see only strange walls and windows and bramble roofs. The steep street of my approach was nowhere visible, and little did I see that succumbed rapidly to a mist rolling from the river despite the glaring moonlight. Suddenly the urn to which I clung to began to tremble, as if sharing my own lethal dizziness, and in another instant my body was plunging downwards to I knew not what fate. The man who found me said I must have crawled a long way despite my broken bones, for a trail of blood stretched off as far as he dared look. The gathering rains soon effaced this link. with the scene of my ordeal, and reports could state no more that I had peered from a place unknown at the entrance of a little black court off Perry Street. I never sought to return to those tenebrous labyrinths, nor would I direct any sane man thither if I could. Of who or what that ancient creature was, I have no idea. But I repeat that the city is dead and full of unsuspected horrors. Whither he had gone, I do not know. But I have gone home to the pure New England lanes up which fragrant sea winds sweep at evening. That concludes our tale for this week, my friend. Please return next week and we will continue with another short story by H.P. Lovecraft. If you wish to rest some more, please find a space that suits you. Whether you curl up by the fire, partake in some food and beverages in our kitchen, take a nap in one of our many rooms, or take a stroll around the garden, please know you are always welcome at Sniper's Rest, my friend. If you are continuing your journey, the multiverse has some interesting and exciting places to visit this week. To the north, raised on the tales of battle, you travel far from home to explore a dark, new land. Forge a name for yourself on the brutal battlefield. May the gods guide you. To the west, once human and now no longer, you must travel to unknown lands in search of a cure. Help folks along your way, and they will help you too. To the east, it would seem we've gotten into a bit of a mess. At least the mob pays good, and we do love to clean. And if you're making your own way out there, good luck, my friend, wherever you end up, wherever you come from, and wherever you're going. Thank you for spending some time here with us at Sniper's Rest. Remember to take care of yourself, be kind to others, hydrate, take a moment to look out into the world and marvel at how incredible it all is. How incredible you are, friend. Until next time, please take care on your way.